Welcome to Field Talk, a Monitor Farm Scotland podcast. Join our host, Wallace Curry, as he explores the stories from Monitor Farm networks on how farmers have adapted their businesses, with support from specialists and experts, to assess farm performance and explore opportunities. Monitor Farm Scotland is farmer-led, farmer-driven, encouraging discussion and solution-based thinking.
Welcome back, everyone, to Field Talk, the Monitor Farm Scotland podcast. This will be episode 2 of series 4. This is the sort of series where we're looking at the management group members. So for those that don't know, if you've maybe not listened to episodes before, there's 9 monitor farms in Scotland, and each one isn't just the farmer or the farmer and their family. It is a sort of management group, a bit of a committee around it, where you can sort of have peer-to-peer learning and bounce ideas off each other. Our guest today is Scott McLellan. Scott, how are you getting on?
Not bad, not bad.
How's it been this year?
It's been a mixed sort of bag this year. Spring was really good, and actually probably historically good for us. We had our spring barley in the 8th of April, which is pretty much unheard of. We actually managed to get dung on and stubble ploughed, and some lea ploughed at the middle of March. End of March, which is really unheard of because we've got heavy clay soils and we're usually sowing end of April. So that was nice. And then the summer was okay. It was a bit wet at silage time. Started tracking the fields just with some of our trailers and that was a bit of a challenge. And then harvest, just before harvest, we got a kind of storm and a lot of salt spray up, which kind of killed off some of the barley, so some of the yields weren't so good across the island. But we were actually all right, managed to get our harvest done early and then scratched in some grass. So it's been a kind of mixed year. There's been highs and lows. I suppose the good thing about the early spring was great. You got everything done, but the bad thing was there was no wet days to actually have a quieter day. So by the end of the spring, I think both my dad and I were pretty knackered.
For those listening, Scott, that maybe don't know you, just sort of what is the farm? What's the story? Farming with your dad, it sounds like. What's the farm look like?
So we've got 2 farms. It's about 1,800 acres. Most of it's Region 2 hill ground. But there are pockets, of wee green fields out the hill where there used to be ruins and small settlements and stuff like that. So it's reasonably productive Region 2. And then we also have a grazing lease on another, a 364-day grazing lease on another 700, 800 acres. So it's just about 2,500 acres between the 3 sort of units. We run 180 suckler cows and predominantly spring calving, 150 spring calvers and 30 autumn calvers. And then we have 650 blackie sheep all on the hill, just do it themselves, and then 50 Beltex cross Suffolk yows out of a blackie yow, and we have them down near our sort of beach. And then we grow wee drop barley either for feeding or for one of the local distilleries, McLellan Distillery, buy local malt in the island. So we'll do a bit of that and then help out with our combine and our seed drill and stuff like that as well if anyone else needs a hand.
Is a lot of the barley in the distilleries on Islay from Islay? There must be a lot brought in, I assume.
Yeah, no, it's a small percentage. There's not enough land, even if it was all Region 1 good arable ground on the island, to grow enough barley for it. It was really McLellan Distillery started this 20 years ago, maybe. Well, they've just been open 20, so probably like 15, 16 years ago. They started getting some barley from some local farms, and it's kind of grown arms and legs. And it suited a lot of other farmers in the island as well, because as maybe they got older or they put stock off, it gave them another option. It gives all farmers another option. So we've kind of always had feed barley because we used to have a dairy before the creamery in the island closed. So we were always set up for combining. So if the price for the malt barley is higher than what it would be for a ton of bought-in barley, then we'll sell it to the distillery. And if not, we'll keep it for ourselves. And it means like your head dregs, or if there's any green bits or anything like that that's maybe not quite good enough for malt, we'll just prop corn and put it in our store and then top it up with anything bought in from the mainland if we need it. So it does work well, and it does mean there's a lot more straw on the island, which is good, because years before, there used to be lorries coming in right, left and centre with straw. You'd have to buy it in. And whereas now you can usually get whatever straw you need on the island. There'll be very few loads brought in, which is quite handy, especially given the capacity constraints and everything like that with the ferries at the moment.
the role of this episode in itself, Scott, is talking about your involvement in that sort of management group around the monitor farm on Isla. Just before, for those listening, first episodes, we spoke to all those monitor farmers, as I said. So if you want to go listen to Craig's story, go and do that. But just for those listening, Scott, can you give us a wee bit of a summary of Craig's farm as the monitor farm?
So Craig is a wee bit similar to ourselves. He runs 1,000 ewes over at Craigan's, and he's got Aberdeen Angus cows. So he's got, I think it's about 220, 240 Aberdeen Angus cows, all spring calving, breeds his own replacements, and some pedigree bulls, and then anything they don't want to keep for breeding, they'll cross out with a Charlie and sell them. And they've also got an oyster farm and recently opened a cafe as well. And what do you call it? The biggest sort of challenge, I suppose, with Craig's farm that'd be quite unique in sort of Scotland, but kind of more representative of what happens in the island, is he gets hammered by geese. So basically, protected white fronts and barnacle geese just arrive in the nature reserve across the loch, and then basically he can have grass, and then they'll just eat them right out, and they'll just turn the fields to mud. So on paper, the farm, and it is a good farm, it's a collection of farms, it's really good, but he basically will struggle to then have grass through the winter, and you can see it when you're out on spins. And basically they start with Craig and then start with other farms in the centre of the island, and they'll eat their way out. So we might manage to hold some grass till January if we're lucky, maybe into February. But then what happens is, as soon as you get a moonlit clear night, it's not cloudy, they'll just fly at night, and then they won't get bothered. You won't see them. You maybe hear them if you're up in the middle of the night. And then 2 days, you think you've got a nice bite coming, a night or two, and there'll be 10,000 geese in the field, and they'll just clear out, and then you'll have nothing.
That must be soul destroying. I was going to ask, does it affect you as well? It seems to affect everyone with it.
Yeah, it affects everyone. There is a scheme to kind of manage it with a compensation element, but I mean, the compensation element's about 25% of the actual cost. And it's been capped, and there's no new scheme coming out, and there's really basically nothing been happening with it. So yeah, I mean, it's like 5 geese eat the same as a sheep. So it peaked at 55,000 geese in the island. So that's like 11,000 sheep coming on and just going round Arran and eating all the grass they want. But the problem is it doesn't grow back because they take it out by the roots.
I mean, you might not know this because I wouldn't know that. How many sheep will be on Isla, roughly?
It'll be down now. There'll be, I think it'll be 25,000 to 30,000 would have maybe been its peak.
Yeah.
But I would say it's less than that now. It's probably down at 20. I mean, we did a freedom information for cattle, and a few years ago through the NFU, and the island's been losing 100 cattle a year since 2000, since the day off, and it's continuing. The suckle herd's continuing to decline. So no, yeah, it's a significant problem on the island is geese.
Scott, tell us about that management group. What made you want to get involved, and I guess what are you getting out of it?
Well, because it's on your doorstep, and there's lots of interesting things. You can go away to the mainland and talks and farm visits and that, but because you live in an island, getting the ferry out, especially winter timetable, it's an overnight stay. Who's going to feed your cow? And then it's a whole day and a half, 2 days, kind of taken out of work. So having that on the island where it's very relevant with these challenges like the geese and weather and different things like that, it was brilliant. So and Craig and his family are really open and honest, and really nice folks. So you knew fine that you'd be able to like bounce ideas off each other, and everyone who turns up at the morning, even in the steering group and that, it's all sort of positive. You're all thinking, oh, could we try this? Could we try that? And different things like that. So yeah, it's nice to see all these things that you maybe read about and you've got a spare moment in a magazine. Actually, some of them trialed close to you and similar climate area, similar stock, and then you can see, oh well, I might not want all of that, or that might not all be applicable in my unit, but some of it might be, and then different things that we could try and bits and bobs like that. So no, it's been good that way. And then yeah, it gives you opportunities for collaboration and meeting new people and different things like that. Because I didn't go to agricultural college, so all these sort of things are quite handy because you get to kind of increase my sort of network. Because before I was an engineer, and before I came back to the farm.
What were you born and bred in Isla?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Um, one thing that's quite interesting, and we picked up on this with Becky last or 2 weeks ago, last episode, um, was who's in that management group. I think people listening to this might think, oh, I've got to be the exact same as the farm in question. There's quite a variation, is that right?
Yeah, yeah, no, there'll be a big variation from some farm managers to other people with no goose problem at all, which is almost like a sole farm in the island. And, yeah, so no, there's a wide variety. Probably most farming systems in the island are represented within the Monitor Farm Management Group, so it's quite good.
Everyone just sits with resentment to the one who doesn't have the geese issue.
He's got other issues, namely deer.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. It's always there's always something, eh? Um, we've talked about island life there, Scott. You and I both born and bred in islands. Um, it comes with challenges. We've got a Hollier Coopers that are somewhat of a godsend that are always coming over, but they're working at the behest of weather to a point for sure, but also Calmac and where they sail and where they don't. But for those listening off island on the mainland, what are the challenges that people maybe don't see? What are the ones that people maybe aren't aware of?
Well, it's just like so logistics. So stuff might not be there when you want it to be there. I mean, Isla used to have, more farmers, shall we say, and more stock, and more fertilizer was bought in, and so two companies would run boats to the island to cut the haulage out, and which was brilliant. So you were getting it delivered cheaper than you could ever get it in over by road because there was enough people wanting fertilizer. Well, now one of the companies has pulled their boat because there wasn't enough volume coming in, so there's only one boat for Yarra. And then, so all the origin stuff comes in through Tarf, and Galway McLeod takes stuff in, but that all comes by road. So, because of the constraints in the ferry capacity, if you want fertilizer, we need to start thinking probably January. So we can then actually get a booking on the ferry to get anything we want in through Tarf Valley and Origin. So it can be booked and in the shed. So then you've got extra shed space. And, the Yarra one, it'll come in by boat. So it's fine. It'll come in, sort of end of March. So you've got, you don't need to hold it for much time. You'll have more straw out of shed. So it's just the sort of logistics of getting stuff in and when a bulker will get in. And I mean, the main thing in Islay is the restricted ferry capacity. So it's lucky we've got a local haulier that takes bulk in. So he knows if he's there, he will get in at some point. But it's more like sort of if you're trying to organise something with a haulier contractor that doesn't usually come to the island, they'll phone and try and get a booking and they'll tell them it's 6 weeks' time. But probably if they had the unit sitting there on a Friday night, something else would have cancelled and they would have got it in. So, it's like you're kind of limited. We're lucky we have good hauliers on the island and people that, know the system to get stuff in. But as soon as you kind of look beyond that, then it becomes a real sort of constraint and you've kind of got to think a few months in advance, what are you going to need? And then even when it comes to sales, then we're talking about a wee bit earlier there, our December sale was cancelled here last Friday. And so if you're a buyer, you're all prepped up, ready to go. 2 days later, the sale's cancelled. So then it's rearranged for a week later. Some of the fat lambs might struggle to get killed now for Christmas because, the 5th of December, you've got time probably to, sort them out, get them in a slaughterhouse, get them hung up, and then onto a plate. But the 12th of December, you're going to start to struggle to do that. So you start missing markets. And then obviously that sickens buyers as well, or send someone else. And then if you get one or two folk buying for up to 10 different lots, I mean, we have good customers and good buyers that come over, but, there's a wee bit less competition there as well. And, so that's not ideal.
There's also that added cost of they're not away this week.
Yeah,
We've got to keep them 5th to 12th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been an issue, and especially when it comes to cattle sales in March and April, that's the sort of biggest crunch time because you'll get 700-800 cattle, sometimes more, at the auction market, and you need to try and get them off that day. And there were 700 booked for the sale on the 5th. So fair play to Calmac. We did say the weather was going to be up, so it was cancelled with UA in plenty time. Instead of getting all those cattle to the market, and then they're standing out in pens, and then they need to try and find a shed somewhere, or take them back home, and then everyone's shut down, with isolation rules. So yeah, there's the logistics of moving cattle about in the weather as well. And sheep aren't as bad. There's some fields at the market, they can hold them for a day or two before they get them away if they need to. But cattle, really, once they're through the ring, they need to be off the island that night.
I mean that's with a focus on commodities, on livestock going in, going off and on. What about in the people side of things? I'm not saying you're looking to hire Scott, but I'm sure you've got an idea of folk that are. Is it hard to recruit on the island? Is there enough sort of labour there, or if you're wanting to bring someone over, does that come with challenges that you wouldn't if you were based in the mainland?
I would say there's a lot of competition for labour on the island because the distilleries and their success in the last 10, 15 years. So, there's very good paying wages available on the island. So getting folk into agriculture is harder. You really need to kind of be, even if you're not born on a farm, you need to be born with it kind of in you or being around it a lot and be really keen on it. So it is harder to get people. I mean, we were really lucky. We've got a young boy that works with us. He's away sunning himself in New Zealand just now. And hopefully he does come back at some point. But, we've kind of lucked out there and it's been brilliant. And but if we weren't and didn't have him, then yeah, it was like, well, who else would we kind of get? And then you could get a worker over to the island, but then housing's an issue. There's just no available housing. So if you don't have a house, then you won't be able to bring anyone in from the mainland if you can't offer them accommodation. So yeah, it is tricky, and not just agriculture. Lots of local businesses have struggled. I think the island had like zero unemployment. I mean, for a while there, if you wanted a job, you had a job doing whatever you wanted, really. Just with the boom in the whisky industry and tourism around that and stuff. So yeah, supply of labour's quite tricky, and then sort of seasonal labour, like I suppose in the mainland, you can get a contractor or different contractors, or you can pull people from a bit further afield if they're quiet. Whereas here, you can't. You need all your own stuff, or you're kind of committed to that. There's only really sort of two main contractors on the island for sort of silage and baling and things like that.
Yeah, it is a tricky one. Is on Arran there's a lot of second and holiday homes. Is that a thing on Islay or no?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big thing. Whether they're being passed down through families, so maybe grandparents or great grandparents sometimes even now, that was their family home and it's been kept in the family. So, it might be busy all summer and maybe a new year, but yeah, during the winter, they're quite dead. And I mean, second houses and holiday homes, commercial holiday letting here has pushed up property prices, just again, with the whisky industry and tourism, the related tourism. So it's a lot harder to get a start here to buy.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that there's that floor on prices. You're seeing really small properties that are worth a lot that that would never be comparable in most places in the country.
Yeah.
With a focus on sort of resilience, Scott, taking a look at your farm, how are you dealing with unpredictable weather? I mean, we're seeing a shift UK wide that's always been known as a pretty temperate climate to not extremes like we see across the world, but certainly a much more extreme weather system than we've been acclimatized to for the last quarter of a century, I guess. How's the farm dealing with that? There's probably that added level that we've already touched on at island living, but in general, how are you dealing with that?
We had to change our system a wee bit. I mean, we never ever used to do any round bales, and all our we outwinter 90 of our spring calvers, and they used to just be they're Highlanders and Whitebread Shorthorn Cross Highlanders. There's 60 Whitebread Shorthorn Cross Highlanders, and then about 20-25 Highlanders, and they used to be fed, silage. You would just be able to put it out in wee lots and wee piles off a trailer out the hill. And then a few years ago, it was actually spurred on because my dad wasn't well and we had round bales to feed, and I couldn't chuck them off a trailer and drive the tractor at the same time. But we've got a hustler unroller, and that unrolls the bales, and that'll mean there's a lot less damage with poaching and things like that. And so it's harder to outwinter cattle, and you need to kind of be cognizant of where you're going, where you're feeding them, move them around the hill and stuff like that. But I mean, we do that as well for biodiversity gain, because choughs are a big thing down the west coast of the island, and especially on our farm. So we outwinter the cattle. It suits our system because like about 30, 40 years ago, my grandfather was going to just build a shed and take them in. And then liaised with SNH, they're like, no, can you please keep them outside? And I mean, the success of the chuff in the area, it was the right thing to do, and we still outwinter them and kind of farm in a chuff friendly way, shall we say. And it suits our system, and it's a lot more labour intensive. You wait for daylight to go out and feed cattle and stuff like that, but it's a lot better for the sort of environment. But it's just, if it keeps getting wetter and wetter, is there going to be some months in the winter we'll need to think about, no, it's just too wet to have them out on that hill? Or like we had to build a feed stands for our Highlanders because the access to different parts of that hill wasn't so handy. So if you're going to make a mess, well, we thought we'd just make a mess in one little bit, and then they can go away to a nice clean dry bed and keep the rest of the hill good for when it's calving time, and then you can feed them hay out now.
I'm interested by those sort of bale rollers, if you will. Does silage get trampled?
No, not so much.
No.
It'll be a little bit, but generally it's a nice line. So they'll put their heads in, like when you put a line of cobs down, or doing that for sheep, they'll all have their heads in. Yeah, someone will maybe stand in a little bit, but I mean, if they're out in a nice fresh bit of hill, it's not as if their hooves are going to be shitty or muddy or anything like that. They'll soon clear it up afterwards. And the thing is, you don't need to feed the whole bale.
Oh, of course. I've never actually even considered that. So that's terrible. Yeah, of course.
So, like, we just take a bale and a half. I'll do all our outside beasts when we're calving. And then once more of them calve, we do calve one lot in a shed now. Then it'll be 2 full bales, and you can take it one in the loader, one in the back, leave the one in the loader in a lay-by, and go and do another lot, and then pick it up and then take it with you. So you can kind of, now it's a one-stop shop and it's a one-man job. Whereas before, if it was Hessian bales of hay, I'd be in a trailer chucking the scuffs off. My dad was driving, or if it was round bales, then I'd be unrolling the round bale and chucking bits of it off the trailer while my dad was driving. So it's kind of cut a labour unit out of there for feeding outside beasts. So it's been handy, and no, it's definitely been a really good investment.
Was that something you had before being involved in the management group, Scott? And if not, is there been any sort of tech or anything like that you've seen through this group that you've either implemented or debated implementing?
I would say the rotational grazing. That was really good to see demonstrated. And even like sort of, you don't need to take it to the nth degree. You read stories, they're down at like half an acre paddock size, mob grazing, and even just if you can do what you can manage, and that was quite interesting. And we've started doing that a little bit more. I mean, it's not, we could do more if we bought more electric fencing and stuff, but basically even just after silage, we've got one lot of cattle. That's all our second calvers, and maybe even some of the third calvers will stay on our farm and not go for summer grazing in the one we rent, just because the grass is better at home, just to keep them growing, because they're simple cross cows, and then we're calving them all down at 2. So if we keep them in good grass, you'll get them back in calve, and you won't stunt their growth too much. And so there'll be like 10-acre fields of roughly their sort of average field size, so you can start rotating them through them. So instead of just letting them go in, eat the aftermath and silage, and then just waiting for it to come back, while they're out grazing on a bit of hill as well, they'll have access to this. Shut them all the fields off, let them graze one, and then move them and move them and move them. Just between, it's only really 3 or 4 fields, but just keep moving them. And if we put some more gates in, or had a wee bit of electric fence, it wouldn't be too hard to then split some of these fields down into 5 acres. It's just a sort of pet project that you see what someone's doing. They did it at Craigens, and it seems to have worked very well. And what can we do? And versus the investment and the time required, because some of them we won't get water to, so they have to get out access to a hill where they can get some water. But still, it's this is what all the theory says, and we best practice, and then this is what's actually been done now through the monitor farm, which is really interesting. And then you can actually take away, well, yeah, this is what we could do with relatively low cost and quite simple with what the setup we've got. And I would say you are seeing a benefit. Not as much as we could. We could maximise the system. We could do more, but we've definitely improved, and we've definitely got more grass. And so it's good. So that sort of stuff, it's kind of converting the theory. You're then seeing it in a local farm or a similar situation, and then you can take from that, be it rotational grazing or anything like that. Then how can you adapt that or take bits and bobs? Because it's kind of like a shopping list. You can kind of mix and match with the monitor farm all the different things and talks you see. Some bits will be applicable, some won't. And then and then you can try little bits and bobs and compare notes and things like that. And one of the good things about monitor farming is as well that you get the market. You'll talk to people, and you will have peer-to-peer learning and sharing stuff. But most people that turn up to a monitor farm program won't have a vision for the future, or want to improve their system, or are looking ahead, or bit more innovative or something like that. So, people will be more of the mindset, we could try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But, what about this? Have you thought about that? So, yeah, it's a bit more collaborative, shall we say, than some of the other peer-to-peer chats you get. Because sometimes, you can speak to older folk and you're like, no, I've always done it because of that way. Or, nah, I tried that once like 30 years ago. It was rubbish. Don't do that. Whereas, like I mentioned before, I did engineering before this. I quite like numbers and, what's it actually going to gain and stuff like that. So if you can demonstrate it's good, that's great. And if you try something that doesn't work, well, there's nothing really lost unless you're wholesale, selling a whole herd of cattle or changing your bulls and all that sort of stuff. Then yeah, it's good.
I think you're also in that learning mindset. You're at the market. There's the stress of buying and selling. I find the market a very stressful place in that regard, I must say. I know it's some people's social spot, but that's sort of when you're in that environment, you're there to chat about a farm and look about how we can make this better. That mindset changes depending on what room you're in as well, and it's got that sort of part to it. Um, on the rotational grazing side of things, Scott, we don't do it at home. You hear about sort of stronger organic matters. You hear about longer root depth and stuff like that. I'm guessing Isla doesn't struggle with drought, but I could be wrong. Are you seeing changes in soil health through it?
I would say we don't do it enough to see any changes, and the fields we all do it in, because we cut silage. Your root depth will come right back, and then when you cut it, and then it'll grow back down. So it's just you suppose your time. But through the winter, I mean, if you've got a field you haven't cut silage on, it will withstand the geese and the weather through the winter a lot better. But we do cut most of our silage, most of our green fields for silage at home. We'll do about 150 acres between the two units of first cut, and then we've started doing a little bit of second cut now. Just we've got that bale and roller for unrolling bales out of the hills. So if there's an odd field, we're in some acre schemes, so we can't kind of maximise that yet, but that may change in the future. So we start to do a job second cut, and that's quite handy.
But for your farm, or maybe even not strictly for your farm, Scott, is there anything that's came out? We've covered a few things there, but anything else that's sort of jumped out, as lesson learned, maybe things you hadn't considered before, or things you had considered before but never seen implemented?
Well, kind of through the monster farm and a bit with RSPB, they did a lot of fluke and the local vets and Moordun, and they did about your liver fluke and when to dose them, and fluke resistance to different dosing drenches and things like that, and that was quite interesting. And and actually seeing the theory, right? Well, you take your sheep in, oh, there's test their dung sample, right? You don't have a fluke problem. You don't actually need to dose them for fluke now. So that's fine in a system maybe where all your fields are quite close by. But then you've then got you do 4 or 5 gathers a year. So you've got the time and all that. So are you not going to give them a fluke dose, even though they don't have it now, and you're not taking them in for the next 6-7 weeks? That's been quite an interesting debate, and not just on the the sort of steering group of the Monitor Farm, but just in sort of general in the island. That's thrown up a few things, and that's been quite interesting. I mean, I know the RSPB up the O, they do it, and they're saving dose and stuff, and they have changed dose and stuff, and then I suppose that was quite an interesting thing as well, because we did do some some testing, and then maybe had a wee bit of resistance, so change our drench and things like that. But then we're not going to gather all our full 4 hill lots in just to see if they've got fluke and maybe dose them, and then take them back in 3 weeks' time to dose them again, because you've got 5 days. We can only really gather 1 lot a day in between feeding everything in the winter routine. So that's another whole week's worth of work. So it's kind of getting the balance right, and that's been quite an interesting debate, throughout it. And it's a good learning curve. And then even like sort of, our cattle, we used to always just dose them for fluke before Christmas, but now are outside cattle. But upon vets' advice and through this sort of programming experience, we'll probably not actually do it till January, or just wait to the end of January when we give them their bolus and everything pre-calving. We give them a bolus that'll cover them for 6 months, and just get them. So the calves are all fine, because we did have an issue with selenium deficiency years and years ago in our calves. So we just bolus everything about a month, 6 weeks before the calve, and then that gives them everything as well to get back in calf.
When you mentioned RSPB there, do RSPB farm on Isla?
Yes, they do. They have a big reserve at the at Urig, just across from the Monitor Farm at Craig's. And then they've also got another 4,000 or 5,000 acre reserve out it's called on the island. So they've got 2 units, and then they actually have another unit over at Small. So they've got 3 separate units. They farm 2 in hand and then have a lease with a tenant in the third.
Okay.
So they're probably out with the estates. They'll be the sort of biggest farming landowner on the island.
Oh, are they? Right.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Um, Scott, you touched on that sort of peer-to-peer learning bit, and that comfort, that sort of that environment of it. You said you hadn't been to agricultural college. What's that environment like? You go into that because Craig's sort of there. He's putting everything out. Everything's on show. What's that environment actually like?
It's good because, if you can have open conversations, and the thing about it, maybe it's unique to Islay, I don't know, because obviously don't farm in the mainland, but my view is we're not in competition with each other. There's not much land availability. There's not seasonal grazing or anything like that. So there's no real competition for land. There's maybe pride for, oh, I've got a better price at the auction market, but that's just sort of natural. Or you want to have good cattle and good sheep or something like that. That sort of healthy competition at the show. There's that, and at the herd competition, but actual business competition, there's not that. And realistically as well, we talk about critical mass in industry in the country. Well, we're struggling as an island with critical mass in the agricultural sector. So kind of the way I view it, Craig's very open in that and everyone's chatting away, but really we all need to actually help each other to have as many cows and sheep and be as profitable as possible, because you don't want to be, as Craig once said, you don't want to be the last one still farming, because you're not going to have an agricultural merchant, you're not going to have agronomists that want to come over. You're going to have to be big enough to do absolutely everything yourself, because there's going to be no casual labour or contractor. So the more efficient and the more any new learnings we can bring into the industry on the island is only going to benefit it, because then it means that the industry will survive, because we are kind of getting to the way the island has hemorrhaged cattle and sheep, over the last 20, 25 years, it's pretty severe. And if that keeps going, then reasonably there won't be much of an industry. And like I was saying, the fertilizer boat from Yara still comes in, and so that'll stop. And then one company struggled to do bulk deliveries of cake, so they gave up. So we're lucky we've got a local island contractor that'll do that. And but otherwise you might struggle to get bulk unless you want to put a bin in and take a whole artic load. So you need to be sort of on the scale where you can buy everything directly then from a mainland merchant, but then you need to be able to use 25 tonne of feed before it's going to kind of go off. So there's all that sort of stuff that the Monitor Farm and things like that. When you can be open and honest and talk about stuff like that, it's like, right, well, this is where we are. What do we need to do as a sort of local industry, and how can we all get better, more efficient, make more money, survive? So it's good. It's good, and it gets you off farm, because every farmer will get bogged down in the day-to-day of actually shoveling it in one end and shoveling it out the other, but not actually thinking, why am I doing it? How could I do it better? And how could I do it more efficient? And you don't have loads of time to go away to see lots of different things, but just that afternoon or morning around your routine at the meeting is really handy.
And does it extend past the group? Islay's an island, so it's not the biggest place in the world, but seeing benefits going out to farmers that aren't involved, are you seeing sort of almost people seeing what's happening with the group and thinking, oh, I kind of want to get involved in that, maybe in Craig's term, or maybe, if there's one down the line?
Yeah, I would say there'll be folk watching it, might not have time to turn up to the meetings and, different things like that, or they'll maybe get an odd meeting and stuff like that. But then, they'll speak to people at the market and different things like that. And then it's kind of, yeah, I'm sure. And I know we're kind of coming to the end of the 4 years this, in 2026. So it'll be quite interesting to kind of the main learnings, once they've been kind of distilled out of, the whole programme, what will we kind of learn, Craig's done a heck of a lot of work, and so have a heck of a lot of other people. So it'll be quite interesting to see, well, if you do this, this, and this is roughly the result in a local farm. And I think once you kind of get those sort of metrics as well, then it'll be maybe a bit of a spur, or for others to kind of do something similar, or to take a look at their own system.
Yeah, and I guess the whole concept of the program in itself is trying to be progressive, sort of looking forward, and maybe as we sort of draw the episode to a close with a sort of outlook on the future. But I'll ask you about the farm itself, Scott. But before that, what does farming on Islay look in the next decade or so? What does it look like?
Uh, well, it'll all depend on how the support gets changed. So that's the biggest challenge. Will be how changes in legislation and support will then affect cattle numbers. Because even like you've got your historic LFA, which has never been rebased since 2009, well, that there would be about another 1,600 cattle in Islay then. So you're getting 1,600 cattle's worth of LFA, additional LFA into the island that aren't there anymore. So those cattle are kind of getting paid for and they're not here. So if that was rebased, then that would then spread, the same pot but over less people. So everyone would hopefully get more LFA if you're still in the game, but also it would then force people to think, right, well, I'm going to need to do more, either put more cows on, let ground out on a seasonal let. It would shake things up, and it would give, I think, youngsters a chance to kind of, even on 364-day grazing leases and stuff like that, it give them a chance to, you might have a full-time job, but do a bit of farming on the side, have some grazing and things like that. So I think the next 10 years, the whole industry will depend on policy going forward. But the key constraints are the young folk we do have in the island is giving them a start, be it, as an employee, if they want a job and have a wee bit of farming on the side or whatever, just access to opportunities, be it land or a job on the island. I think that'll be the biggest thing for Islay, is to retain that sort of, folk that are in their mid-20s, early 20s, late teens, is if they can get involved in the industry, then that's great on the island and there'll be some sort of continuity. If that fails to happen, then yeah, we're going to kind of be in a sticky sort of place, I would say.
And making it attractive, like you said earlier, in a world where the distilleries exist. Yeah,
And yeah, they're not in the best place just now, but it's just like oil. It's boom and bust with distilleries. It'll go up and go down. And, but yeah, it's competing with other demands of labour as well in the island, which is an additional pressure.
I assume American tariff changes have put it in a weird spot at the minute, but I really don't know much about the
Well, yeah,
whiskey industry.
basically, well, it's not totally crashed. There's not been too many layoffs yet, but the biggest knock-on effect instantaneously is draft. So as soon as they cut their production, the availability of draft, and actually a lot of it, there's a very large feed company, shall we say, has the contract to take away draft, and basically the ones they used to leave the draft for on the island, for local farmers, their productions, a lot of them are closed for extended shutdown periods, or the production's dropped. So they're still shipping all the draft away from the other distilleries, and the farmers in Islay can't get hold of it. Our local distillery, McLellan, they're really good. They give it to the local farmers, but their production is, I don't know, I think it's about 2/3 of what it was at its peak. So that means obviously 2/3 of the draft availability. So it's just that then that's going to then force changes again, because people will need to make more silage. So they might grow a bit less malt barley for the distillery. So yeah, it's so interesting how just different things affect it.
And then with a focus on the farm itself, Scott, you've already touched upon minimizing silage wastage there. You've sort of looked at rotational grazing. You spoke about the sort of next decade, if you will, on farming in Islay in general. But what about for yourself? Certainly look like a young man yourself. Any changes that you see happening in the next few years on the farm, both from a sort of production perspective, but also that sort of sustainability angle as well?
Um, don't see too much changing in the next 5 years. We've done a lot of soil sampling and different things like that. Like I say, done a lot of EEC schemes over the years, and our system kind of works. And they were, you got a business review by someone at Lawrence School, and that was really interesting because even through the monitor farm, there's lots of different things you could be doing, and there's lots of data, and that's what I suppose one thing we've learned through the monitor farm is, yeah, you can collect a lot of data, but what's the data telling you, and what are you actually going to do with it? And I think it's like, to get your 80% of efficiencies or gains or whatever, are probably relatively simple and easy. It's the last 10, maybe 15%, to be like 100% efficient, which I suppose is never achievable. But, to get that last little bit, it's how much time and energy you can devote and, data collection and all that to actually get that last little bit. And that thing from, Lawrence Gould was great because someone totally independent went through your books and were like, yeah, you're doing a decent enough job. And, we benchmarked a few years ago as well when we did an ILMP with our local SAC advisor, Jenny Love, and that was really interesting as well because then again you were getting compared to similar units, and it just gives you a litmus test to if I'm not where everyone else is, then there must be something big I can change. I maybe need to change. If I'm roughly where everyone else is, then I'm not too bad. And if I'm maybe a wee bit better than average, then I'm you're doing all right. There's maybe tinkering, but you don't need wholesale change. So it's kind of looking at that because, like I said earlier, you're that busy farming, you don't get time to step back, and that's what the monitor farm is. It's an afternoon or two just to step back from the day-to-day actual farming to then think about, from a helicopter view, where you're going, what you want to do, and how you can manage things better. So the next 5 years, probably not too much difference. I would like another shed or two. Dad probably doesn't, have a few more cows. We've started breeding our own pedigree Limousin bulls. My daddy eyes them. He used to eye all our dairy cattle, so that's been quite handy and reduced our costs that way buying in bulls. And it means they last longer because they're not forced for a sale. So be kind of much the same. I mean, and the thing from a sort of my perspective is do you sell half the stock and basically go down to a one-man unit with my dad as he gets older, and then try and bring in someone to help, and if you can, and basically just ranch the place, but you'll never have a day off because there's no one else. So if anything happens to you, there's no one to cover because there's very little casual labour in Ireland. That's one option, but my preferred option is to maintain a business that's large enough that you can employ at least one other person. So you can have every second Sunday off. You can use someone to cover while you're on holiday or there, and stuff like that. Because or if anything happens to you, like last October, these bulls have been breeding. I put some feeding down. One of them decided no, it was his feeding, and then pushed his older brother right over me and ended up flown away to Paisley. And got my wife for her first helicopter ride to Glasgow. And so it was fine. Cracked ribs and that, but they thought it could have been a bit worse. And I nearly got my head stood on. So if that had went wrong, then all of a sudden the whole picture changes. If you're not farming on your own, at least there's someone else there. So if anything does happen as well, you've kind of got support.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're certainly transitioning to a better place. The discussions are happening. You're talking about it. It would normally just be, oh, yeah, it happened, whatever. But yes, it still needs a lot of work. And things like Farm Safety Foundation are probably the ones that jump out, like the Yellow Wellies are raising that awareness, which is good. But yeah, we'll hopefully we keep trending in the right direction. But I mean, your lucky wife getting a lovely helicopter ride, Scott, obviously. I think one thing to mention, you touched on the work with Lawrence Gould there. That's the Monitor Farm Scotland Management Accounting Guide that I think they released, or not released, like announced, I guess, at AgriScot this year. Another sort of benefit to be involved in the programme. Scott, just to draw the episode to a close, one thing I've tried to ask everyone that I remember to ask, maybe don't ask everyone, sometimes I forget, but if someone was listening to this, I've asked all the monitor farmers what they would say to someone wanting to be a monitor farmer, but if someone was listening to this that maybe doesn't want to be a monitor farmer, they're not ready to sort of take that leap, what would you say to someone maybe interested in getting involved in that management group itself?
I would say do it because it's not like you need to turn up to every meeting. You can you do need to be involved to a certain extent, but you can get as much out of it as you kind of put in. So it's not going to, the meetings are at the evenings or, there's afternoons here and stuff like that. So it's very doable, and you will learn stuff. And, if there's stuff that you don't want to do, you don't need to do it. It's better to go and find out, all right, this is this new system or, this great system you read about in magazines or, industry papers or whatever. You go and turn up, you look at it at the monitor farm, you're like, there is no way we can implement this efficiently at all at home. So, that's fine. You don't even need to investigate it. You can look at other avenues to, make your business more efficient. So I'd say it's really good, and it's definitely worth it. And I mean, as well, you're getting good speakers, and you can choose who the speakers. You can actually pick as the sort of steering group who you want to come to the meetings. So if there's anything you're particularly interested in, then the Monitor Farm, will try and find that person and bring them over. Like we had a very interesting meeting the other day with about spraying crops with a drone now, and broadcasting cover crops, which now is going to be under new greening rules. If you've got more than 15 hectares of temporary rotational grass or arable, you're going to need to do additional greening measures. So that was even talked about. Well, a few of us with barley on the island, we could actually, if we all teamed together, we could potentially get this drone over, whether you do tram lines or not, and he could broadcast. One farm's done it with a trial successfully, and now we all might need to do something like that, is broadcast like clover and seed into a standing crop of barley before you harvest it, and then at least it'll come away in time before the winter sets in, and then you've got a cover crop to comply with this extra greening rules. So just things like that, you'll pick out things that will actually be applicable to your business.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a pretty similar statement that's been said by most people. I mean, we've only actually interviewed Becky so far, but I spoke to a few people certainly at the what would you call it? It was like the chat about Monitor Farm Scotland at the Highland Show this year, and I've not heard really many negative words. I've been quite impressed by it, and I'm not paid to say that, by the way. Just yeah, it sounds like a really good thing in general. And for those that are interested in the whole concept of the management groups, that's what this whole series is about. So, Scott, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
No problem at all.
No, it's been great to chat. And for those that are interested in hearing more, if this is the first episode you've came across, the last one we had, and the first of this series was Becky McAngus, who talked to us about sort of chairing that group and the role involved in that, along with some other stuff that Becky does as well. In the next episode, we're going to talk about not only being involved in the management group, but we're going to head to Ayrshire with David Whiteford and talk about a shift in system there. And we're going to go around all 9 management groups over this series. But as ever, thank you very much for listening to Field Talk, the Monitor Farm podcast, and we shall see you for the next one, hopefully with David Whiteford. See you then.
Thanks for tuning in to the Monitor Farm Scotland podcast. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from for more episodes as we continue to dive into the stories from our Monitor farms. If you want to stay updated with our latest news and events, please visit the Monitor Farm Scotland website and follow us on social media for more updates and keep in the know about what our farms are getting up to. Monitor Farm Scotland is funded by Scottish Government and managed by Quality Meat Scotland and AHDB.